for making it possible for me to visit with you. It's perfect timing, honestly, as Carlos can attest. There's so many things happening in Fort Worth. Lots of good work happening, specifically around the budget. I'm going to talk about the budget at the end because I thought I'd invite Carlos back up and we can kind of talk to you about what our priorities are on council. And importantly, to let you know that the process is not over. So there's still plenty of time for you to ask questions, come to meetings, inquire. Of course, come to Councilmember Flores or myself. But I think you can be really proud of where the city of Fort Worth is headed, and we'll end with that. I'm going to talk about a few things that many of you know are passion projects for me, but I think I would argue are the most important things facing the city of Fort Worth and Tarrant County. And the first topic is really around education for our students and our families. I'll start at the beginning of the spectrum, which is cradle to career, so at cradle. Right now in the United States, the entire country is divided around the issue of abortion. And I know how difficult it is sometimes around your dinner tables, in your communities, in your neighborhoods. But what I can tell you is we on council can't solve that issue. So what can we do to better serve women and children specifically? Because we all know we haven't done enough to make sure that they come into this world protected and cared for. So why does that matter to this group here? Well, first of all, I'll give you a little hint as to why this was a passion for me before mayor. My oldest is adopted. So Shane Girl joined our family when she was 10 years old, out of foster care. And it opened my eyes to so many things in our communities that are lacking, especially for those that are most vulnerable. But it starts a lot earlier, even in her life. So we're working on a few different huge projects. Carlos has been instrumental in this as well, to focus on quality early childhood education for our families, making sure that parents have access to quality child care opportunities. You'll hear a lot about child care deserts in Fort Worth and Tarrant County. By the way, we are sitting in what's considered a child care desert. And why should that matter to each of you? Even if you're not raising young children, even if you don't have grandchildren, if you're running a business, one of the top reasons an employee will tell you they can't come to work or they want to go to a different job is surrounded around those benefits for children. And those babies need to be in high quality environments at the same time. So how does that translate to the city of Fort Worth? So at the beginning of our administration, we were still working through ARPA dollars, which are those federal dollars made possible during COVID-19. And we made a really distinct decision, both at the city and at Tarrant County level. Huge kudos to our Commissioner's Court for recognizing this as well. These are one-time funds made possible to completely transform communities, and we cannot squander that opportunity. And one key area we made big investments was in child care infrastructure across the city of Fort Worth. So there are two pots of money you should be proud of. One, we put $7 million in the infrastructure and the facilities. Because I don't know about you, I think every child deserves to walk into a beautiful facility where they receive the highest quality of early child education. And I can tell you in Fort Worth for decades, some parts of town had that and the other half did not. And until we really focus differently and recognize that the environment that children are growing up in, especially in education, really does matter and can be transformational for families. So we partnered with Child Care Associates on that $7 million. But we also are working with the Center for Transforming Lives. Many of you may know that CTL's work. They're building a brand new campus in South Fort Worth, which is going to be spectacular, focused on holistic care for families and children and high quality child care. I'm very proud of that investment, but there's more. In working with Tarrant County and Judge Whitley and their Commissioner's Court, they've set aside over $40 million to focus on early childhood education. At the same time, we're coupled with workforce solutions, and that's how our dole out child care subsidies through the state of Texas. So in Texas, this may sound crazy, but if a mama gets child care subsidy to help serve their family, what happens? Well, she gets penalized if she gets a higher paying job and loses her subsidy. So we need to work with our legislative partners in Austin to make them understand if you have a child care subsidy and you go and get a higher paying job, you should not lose that subsidy to be able to care for your children because it negates the purpose of the program in the first place. So without getting into the weeds, there's a lot of advocacy you're going to see our office do in the coming months as we head into the next legislative session. I can promise you these efforts are one of the top issues in our economy today. If you talk, especially to working parents, this is the top issue that they have. I can give you my own personal example. When my daughter went to Texas Tech in the fall of 2020, yes, during COVID. Wait on that one, sorry. At the beginning of COVID, My 4-year-old's tuition at a Montessori school was more expensive than her university credits were at Texas Tech University. That's what people are facing. The other thing you have to worry about, and if you know someone that works in childcare, appreciate them. Because right now in the Texas economy, you can make more money as an entry-level cashiers at Buc-ee's, making $17 or $18 an hour, than you can make caring for our most important asset, which is our children, and the average salary is around $12 an hour. The system is completely broken, and there's a lot of work that those of us that have a bully pulpit need to do to help fix it. So, without boring you with more detail, understand that child care here in the Fort Worth economy is incredibly important. We also understand how vitally important it is to make sure our K through 12 systems are working with families and understanding what it looks like to have good student outcomes and making sure all of our students go on to success. We're not there yet. As many of you know, unfortunately, we've stopped talking about student outcomes and we're talking about these fringe issues that really don't impact kids and families. So what I try to do is empower groups like these to be more involved in your local school. Get to know your principals or your teachers that serve in those communities and ask how you can help, because I can promise you each individual campus and pyramid has different needs. As you know, Fort Worth ISD, which is only half of our students attend Fort Worth ISD, by the way, the other half attend one of the other 12 ISDs in Fort Worth, which is hard for a lot of people to believe. They're going through a really important superintendent search right now that will lead the district into the future. Make sure you're watching that process closely and then helping serve into this next year. Our student outcomes have seen some improvements. I think you're going to see some announcements in the next few weeks about where student outcomes are, but we still have a tremendous amount of work to do. Prior to being mayor, I ran an education nonprofit, and I'll give you this statistic and I'll move on from education. But only 14% of our low-income kiddos were making it to a 2-year or 4-year credential after high school. And if they, a whole percentage of the population is only 23%. So when you know that the economy requires some type of credential, 70% of jobs require some type of credential after high school, those students are not prepared for success in college and coming after a career. So think about those things as they sneak up on you as a state and as a community. What are we doing together to really change that? And I would argue that one of the biggest factors is not putting more industry input into the way K-12 and post-secondary work together. So those are some efforts that we're working on as well. So if I pivot from education that's really around economic development, they really are tied together, as you might imagine. You have to have a great, sound education system to have good economic development. We're going through a huge transformation in this space. As you can imagine, post-COVID, every business started thinking differently of what they wanted in a workplace, and what type of employees they needed to be successful. And I would argue that the heartland of America, which is where we sit, the Midwestern area, has been incredibly successful in business recruitment. Texas is included in that. But honestly, Fort Worth has not gotten our fair share. Oftentimes we lose to an Austin or a Houston or a Dallas. And so again, without boring you with too many details, just know that there are a few different key people in our communities that are working. But here's the key, not just any job. We need jobs that pay a living wage and then offer a real career path for their employees, and often have those other benefits around education that really can help those folks continue to be successful long term. So more to come on economic development in the future, and I'll just add this too. For a long time, there's always been a focus in very specific sectors of the city, but you have to be prepared to offer the opportunity across the city of Fort Worth. And there's a reason why that hasn't happened, I would argue. But rather than look back, I was probably 10 when some of those decisions were made. All I can do is look forward to the future and work with my colleagues like Carlos on council to really make a difference across local communities. When it comes to community building in general, and Charles and I could talk a lot about what we're seeing across the city of Fort Worth, a lot of positive. In this last bond election, thank you so much if you voted in this last bond. $560 million towards the RIDE project, 60% by the way, just over, on mobility and transportation projects. But we used a different lens for this bond election, using data to understand where should our priorities lie across the city of Fort Worth to make sure we're using those resources. So that's what you saw in that bond election. You'll start to see those projects roll out in the coming months, and we'll do our job to communicate by district what you should be expecting, and Carlos does a great job with that as well. The last thing I'll talk about, and then I'd love to take questions from each of you can ask, is around the city budget. So the city of Fort Worth continues to be one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and with that comes an immense responsibility to keep up. And in our budget this year, I think there's going to be a few key categories. You'll hear a lot about being a clean and safe city. And around cleanliness is really just focused on our environmental fund and stormwater. Fun fact, we have 2 street sweepers for the entire city of Fort Worth. We're going to go from 2 street sweepers to 12 street sweepers, right? Over 8,100 lane miles in the city of Fort Worth, we'll cover 6,500 per week. The litter abatement efforts, you're going to see that really triple across the city of Fort Worth. Homeless camps cleaned up, tripled efforts in those areas. Because the broken windows theory is real. If you show that you don't care about community and cleanliness, I might tap this a little bit, sorry. So if you don't care about cleanliness, it's a hard effort to keep a city safe. When it comes to public safety, it's multiple efforts across different departments, but it has to start with a strong police department. You'll see 90 personnel added to the Fort Worth Police Department in this budget. Most of those are sworn officers, but there are additional civilian positions in the police department. It's neighborhood police officer program, which we know all how successful that has been, and we all want more NPOs in our neighborhoods. It is more patrol officers. But importantly, it's an infusion of resources to double the size of our crisis intervention team and our HOPE team. And if you've heard about the crisis intervention team before, it's incredibly impactful. It's a multidisciplinary team with MHMR and Fort Worth PD to make sure you're responding to mental health crises in a way that really helps families. When you have a mental health crisis in your household, sometimes a uniformed officer showing up without the proper training or without a social worker on hand is really not going to solve the problem for that family. And additionally, the way we're dealing with our homeless population, our HOPE team is able to do so in concert with paramedics or EMTs in our fire department. Really proud of these efforts. You'll hear quite a bit more. I highly encourage you to ask those questions. If you're curious about your budget, if there are things that you're worried about in your community, please work with Carlos and I to really make a better effort. I do feel strongly one thing you're going to hear only about, and this will be frustrating to me, is we are reducing the tax rate by 2 pennies in this budget. But unfortunately, because appraisals have gone up so rapidly in the city of Fort Worth, you might not necessarily see a break in your tax bill. So on average, you might see so the average house in Fort Worth, you'll break that down, about 24% of your entire bill is for the city of Fort Worth. So think about when you write that property tax check and you grimace, just like the Parker family does, right? And you understand what you're getting for 24% of that bill. It's your police, fire, trash, streets, all the things that are fundamental to a safe and beautiful city are in those numbers. And then furthermore, we have a responsibility, Carlos and I, to demonstrate if your bill's going up slightly, what are we doing with that $100 a year? What are you going to get in return? So you'll see quite a bit of communication in English and Spanish in the coming weeks. So we get that dialogue from the community to make sure we're demonstrating a return on investment. We need to treat your resources with incredible value to make sure you feel like you have buy-in from as a community member. So please give us that feedback if you're not seeing what you want to see in the future. Carlos, you want to add anything on budget I'm not thinking of?
Give a pretty good overview, Maddie, and again, you're right. What it comes down to is delivery of public service. What it means to every one of us that live in Fort Worth, right? We have 3 budget priorities that we talked about in the city manager said. We reduce the property tax rate. That's what the city of Fort Worth can do. And keep in mind, I know that I get that same shock when I open up my tax bill and I look at it. It's a hit to the gut, right, as well as the pocketbook. But be assured that your city council has continued every year, consecutive year that I've served on council, continue this policy of reducing the property tax rate. Fort Worth's contribution to your tax bill is only 1/3, right? The bulk of it comes from Fort Worth ISD and the evaluations of your property, every by tab. So that's the reality of it. We're doing what we can to offer some relief. We'll continue to do that as our budget allows. We also talked about PAYGO a little bit. In so many words, PAYGO is a fund that has allocated dollars to do repairs that aren't covered in our budget. Repairs that involve sidewalks, streets, street lights, which is a big thing and a big problem that we have to tackle in Fort Worth. Fortunately, our city manager has recommended an increase in that, I believe, to a little over 45 million. So we're trying to make headway there. We get it loud and clear. I'm proud to say that the north side was one of the very first areas in the entire city that began to make headway in that regard. With the neighborhood improvement plan, you may recall, we focused on the target area, and within that target area, we replaced 536 street lights to an LED standard. Now keep in mind, to upgrade a street light isn't simply just changing bulb. You're talking on average $15,000 per street light to do it, to take care of the wiring. So consider that for a moment. And here in the near north side, 536. Diamond Hill, which is another big area, we're a little over between 60 and 65% done. They have 709 street lights. Just kind of put a little perspective to it. So we're still working on that. And again, as Mandy covered, a clean city, because a clean city means a safe city, right? It's the impression given. And you don't want road debris on there that your vehicle might hit as well. That's why we're investing in street sweepers. You know, and the environmental fee that you see in your water bill, that's been in place at 50 cents, unchanged since 1996. If anything, that's a testament to your city government that we've tried to keep your costs down and in control for a very long period of time. But our city is growing. You know, we have the stresses of all the folks coming in, wanting to live in Fort Worth, wanting to live in the Tarrant County area, so we have to respond. And so the increase, I think, is very moderate, but it's going to produce results. It's not merely keeping up, but it's delivery of additional services, investments like street sweepers, and increased efforts to clean up our city and maintain it clean. And like Mandy said, that includes not just litter, but also, you know, the homeless population issue we have. You know, there are folks, they run into the hard times. You know, we have to be compassionate, but we also have to be smart about how we deal with them. That's why we launched the HOPE team, you know, with the help of the Fort Worth Police Department. And it is a comprehensive approach. HOPE team, code compliance, and also supportive services come in when we deal with those matters of the homelessness. Did I cover everything, Mandy? Is there anything else? Okay, thanks, man.
So last thing I'll say that's a little uncommon. I'm one of your youngest mayors serving in the country. So I'm 38 years old and I have 3 kids. I mention this because that's a difference, especially for Fort Worth, than you've seen before. So I'm a different mayor than anybody else. Why is that? Because my kids and my family come first, right? So it is not uncommon for me to come flying into an event and then head to a baseball game, right? Or be at a school issue. I've got a 1st grader this next year and a 6th grader, and my daughter's out of the house. And I think that it's incredibly important for me to mention that because at the end of the day, what matters most to each of you? Your families. And it certainly keeps me grounded. We're just talking with Domingo. You can't get caught in the bubble of City Hall and politics and business because I go home every night to make sure those kids are taken care of and have their mom. And I just say thank you because I would argue that our community has recognized the value in that of service. I'm not the only one on council. There are 20 children on council between the 9 of us, different age groups, and to juggle that responsibility is significant. I don't mention it to feel sorry for me. I want to say thank you for letting me get to serve with the entire family and be a better example for generations to come. It's an incredibly divisive time right now in politics. And I certainly can't solve the national and state narrative, but Carlos and I work very hard together, and I think oftentimes he and I truly are the ones solving the discrepancies or issues on council to try to find consensus and compromise wherever possible, and respect one another from that dais so that you're proud of that as well at home. Because I don't know about you, it's really frustrating when you turn on the TV and politicians or elected officials are getting nothing done, but they're really good at the underhanded comments or the next thing they posted on Twitter. And I just don't think that's how you solve problems. And I know for Fort Worth, it's vitally important we work together. So you get to hold us accountable. If you see, especially Carlos and I, act out of turn, remember what we said, right? That we're going to be consensus builders in Fort Worth and make a difference for all of our city. Happy to answer any questions. Thank y'all for being patient. I know that good food is getting delivered right now. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm from Dallas. I'm not from Fort Worth, but I do have a question.
We like Dallas. It's okay.
With the shooting that happened in Uvalde, tell me the specifics on the collaboration you have with the ISD in identifying who's going to take the lead in the event of an active shooter, and what kind of training and preparedness do you have with this ISD? And the second question, you're talking about the budget. Are you allowing for training specifically for Latinos, so they could be Spanish bilingual staff with the police department to be able to address the needs of the entire community?
So the first question related to school safety and security. So the week after the tragedy in Uvalde, we sat down with our police department and fire department to understand that collaborations are already in place. So there are specific school districts, most notably Keller ISD and Fort ISD, where we are the police department on hand for these school districts. So we have student resource officers, there are 4 police officers that are in the middle schools and high schools, and not in the elementary schools. We'll get to that in a minute. We also have districts that collaborate, like Eagle Mountain, Saginaw. We would still be in charge of command in a crisis incident, and that relationship has existed for years. But to your point, the amount of training and collaboration has to take place continually. And Chief Neil Noakes has done a wonderful job making sure that we were prepared as possible for this next school year. In addition to that, our fire department has been working in kind of a fire marshal capacity to help these school districts and the principals understand how to keep the perimeter safe, their doors locked, if they need repairs, working with the school district. There's a lot. You can imagine Fort ISD, they have, I don't know how many hundreds of facilities to take care of. And so this now has to be the top priority for them, and what we can do as a city to make sure they have the resources to understand how to do that. When it comes to staff, with PD and with fire, and really all of our community members, to making sure that they feel welcome and heard. We have a variety of different language programs in the city of Fort Worth to make sure there's no translation issue. I have Maria's here on staff today. She does a lot of, Maria's from East Fort Worth. My Spanish speaker on staff does a beautiful job for me. But Fort PD pays you more money if you can speak Spanish, of course, and making sure we're reaching out to the community. We've done a great job under Julie Swearingen, who's one of our deputy chiefs, an outreach program across the community to recruit and retain talent from in our neighborhoods to serve as Fort Worth police officers. And you're starting to see those classes graduate in higher numbers. We're really proud of the diversity of the department at this point. But very important issues. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. The police department's investments in the budget, are those being totally funded by the general fund or
Great question.
CCPD?
Yeah, it's both. So I would say of the 90 positions I mentioned, the majority of those positions are out of the general fund, but most of our training and equipment comes out of CCPD to supplement those positions.
Hello, thank you guys for being here. Real quick, I know Fort Worth is allowing short-term rentals in like mixed use and industrial areas, but it's not allowed in residential areas still. Short-term rentals, Airbnb. So is that going to be allowed in the future? I know that, I don't know that they will not use, but I just want to know what your plan is on Airbnb short-term rentals. So
we haven't made any decisions yet. We have a briefing coming up at council by Dana Bergdorf, one of our assistant city managers, that's done the predominant amount of the policy opportunities there are, but also data, gathering of data. Candidly, I would tell you, this is one of the tougher issues that major U.S. cities are facing. And here's why. It's you have to maintain the quality and the sanctity of your neighborhoods and protect them. You also have private property rights on both ends. You have homeowners that want to make additional income, and you have a homeowner over here that doesn't want a stranger next door to them. So we're going to move slowly and make no decisions rashly. And I am being sincere, please reach out to us if you have an opinion or insight into this, especially if you have a way to be rational, because unfortunately, there's really differing viewpoints. You got people yelling over here and yelling over here, and it's going to be important for Carlos and I to be able to bring everybody together and make a decision. I'm not afraid to punt anything until we get to a place. I would also add that the only ordinance I've seen in the country that seems to be working for the community is in Denver. That's it. And it's not perfect by any means. And I do think, by the way, there's a difference between an owner-occupied STR and a commercially owned STR, meaning a business versus a homeowner. So these are tough issues for us to work through as communities. But I highly encourage you, please give us your opinion, what you're seeing, and what you're hearing from your neighbors also, what they're concerned about. I don't remember, do you remember the number off the top of your head, how many we have in Northside right now?
That's still being,
Yeah, but it's going to be significant.
In Fort Worth, it's between 1,600 and 1,700.
Illegally operating STRs. And we, by the way, this is I'm not afraid to kick a hornet's nest. It's been like that for a long time. We just pretended like it wasn't an issue, and I have a problem with that. Like, if we've got an issue in our community, we can't pretend anymore. Let's deal with it and create the right ordinance. Yes, ma'am. I just have 2 comments and 2 questions. I live in Arlington, but I do operate a business here in West Fort Worth. One, thank you for opening up the recreation centers free of charge for our youth. I think that's very, very important to keep them being productive and not doing something that they're not supposed to. And also, as a PTA mom, I think one of the best ways for everyone here to get involved is join your local school's PTA. I'm actually trying to recruit members here today. But my 2 questions are, what is the city doing to address the mental health gaps here in the county? I think that's a big issue that's affecting children in our schools and in our community. And also, as an employer that employs employees that use the transportation system here in Fort Worth, what are you all doing to improve the ride time? So the first question about mental health, cities in Texas, and I'll just speak for Fort Worth, we don't have any capacity or funding to help with mental health. But 5 years ago, when they created the CIT team, was in public safety, that is our role and responsibility to be able to respond respectfully to families in crisis, and so we're putting huge investments in CIT. However, Tarrant County has recognized this is one of the 3 pillars they're trying to work on through their ARPA funding. They have a very large bucket of money, I think it's $50 million focused on mental health and safety for community that they're working through. Those monies have not been handed out or granted out completely yet. They're working with local organizations across our community and to help make a difference. The one caveat to that is we worked with Tarrant County to create the first jail diversion center in the city. So meaning if someone gets arrested and they obviously are in a mental health crisis, or maybe they're just true drunk and need to sober up, they don't need to go downtown to jail. They need to go to this diversion center and likely get the help that they need, mostly in mental health services, and that has been open and running for about 4 months. So we quietly open, there's no fanfare needed to really serve community better. I think those partnerships will really make a difference. But lastly, there are a lot of things that need to change at a state policy level. We've made a lot of improvements. Senator Jane Nelson is actually retiring. This was one of her #1 priorities. And she's put tens of millions of dollars towards mental health in the last 2 budget cycles. She was your appropriations chairwoman in the Senate. But with her departure, we need another champion in the legislature to understand the needs of mental health in the community. So great question, for sure. Anybody else? I know y'all got other programs, maybe one more and then I'll close out. Yes, sir.
I have a very simple question in regards to the new legislation approved by Congress in reference to gun violence. If I'm not mistaken, they approved money for the mental health issues. I would like to know if you're familiar with that and how do you think it's going to work. The community is going to have access to this money, or is it going to MHMO or to the police department? Do you know how it's going to work?
No one knows yet. Typically, this is not necessarily written in stone yet, but typically what you see happen in monies like that, it'll pass through to your state health agency. It would do grant making at a local or county level, maybe through public health or through your county hospital system. But we're still watching that rulemaking really closely. In fact, we have a legislative team in DC that's sort of, they passed the bill, but all the particulars are not written yet. But the community will know because we're going to have to work with the state legislature in that session if there are certain things we want included for local community grants to be made. And importantly, get the money as quickly as possible. It's not going to do us any good if we wait 3 years to institute some of those changes that are needed. Absolutely. Anything else? One point of political privilege I'll give you when it comes, since you mentioned guns. I've taken a very public stance, and if you agree with me, I'll use your help. If you don't, we can talk more about it. But in the state of Texas right now, you can be 18 and purchase a semi-automatic weapon. You can walk in on your 18th birthday and purchase it. But you can't drink, and you can't smoke. I find that to be incredibly inconsistent policy. And as someone that's really been in policy making for 20 years, let's be consistent. And so I'm trying to use my pulpit to convince the legislature, please move that age from 18 to 21 at the bare minimum. Can we please put partisan aside and focus on what's best for families? So I've stuck my neck out a little bit. So if anybody feels strongly about that and you want to work on it with me, please let me know. And I've got a good coalition. My friend Ginger Nelson and Amarillo, she and I are both working on it together to try to convince legislators from all shapes and sizes, both parties, to look at this issue differently and kind of come outside the gun lobby. So I'd love your help if you're interested in helping with that. Thank you all for having me today. Happy Saturday, okay?
Thank you, Mayor. By the way, I own AR-15, but I support her position. If you have to have a driver's license and take driver's ed to drive a car, you should at least have a firearm safety course and be 21 to own an AR-15. So I truly believe in bipartisanship on that. All right, our next speaker is Jaime Hernandez. He's with the CASA Child Advocacy Supervisor, and he's going to be talking a little bit about what he's doing and what we can do to help. Jaime.
Thank you. Buenos días a todos. No les oigo. Buenos días, good morning. I can do this in Spanish or English, right? It looks like I need to do it in English. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it. All that are here. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to read off of some notes that I have because I think it's going to be easier. CASA of Tarrant County. CASA does not stand for house. It's not house. It's an acronym that means Court Appointed Special Advocates. So we have like a frequent asked questions, and I'm going to go off of that because I think it's going to be very helpful in helping you all understand why I'm here. I really appreciate Mayor because her focus on children, and we have a big focus on children, and this is, you'll see why I say that. What does CASA stand for? I already told you, is Court Appointed Special Advocates. And what's the mission? CASA's mission is to provide advocacy for children that are in the foster care system. And children go through very hard times when they are in the CPS custody. Many of you probably know someone that has gone through that, or probably even have a relative that has gone through that, where the children are removed from their home and they are taken care of by the state. And we all know that the state is not a very good caregiver, right? Yeah. So we need advocates that will help with what's going on with the children throughout the tenure of that case. We have a doctor here that is a counselor for children, and people like him and others are the ones that will intervene in what's going on in the life of the child once they become part of the system. And so right now, CASA has, very big need for people that are bilingual. Many cases that are coming into the system are from Hispanic or Latino families. And I'll give you numbers here in a minute, but I wanted you to know that it's a big need, and that's the reason we're here. Because our community, these children are from our community. And so because it's from our community, then we have a responsibility to help what's going on in those families. So what is the impact in the community of CASA? When an advocate is assigned to a child or to a case, and sometimes the cases are more than one child, a CASA is in charge to know what's going on in the life of the child, in every aspect of his or her life. Whether it be in school, whether it be medical, whether it be mental health, whether it be anything that has to do with what's going on in their life while there is this case of CPS. And I'm going to give you some numbers that are going to be a little bit alarming. That's why I'm excited about what the mayor was talking about, because our children need support from day one. And there are times when that support's not there, they fall through the cracks, so to speak, and they end up in the system. And even our parents need a lot of support, and the families need support, and the community, we in the community are the ones that are charged to help support those families. And so how can someone become a volunteer? I'll talk about that later. So what is the state foster care system, or the state of the foster care system in our community? This is the information that I think is very significant for us to know. 663 children were removed last year. If you think about that, I like an illustration that our CEO uses. By the way, our CEO is back there, Don Binneker. And he uses this illustration. I heard him say it one time, and I said, that's a very good illustration. 663 children. Imagine a whole elementary school disappearing. All the children gone. That's how big that number is. 600.
Is that local or statewide?
This is for Tarrant County. This is just for Tarrant County. By the way, Tarrant County, as far as the state is concerned, is the third in the removal of children. So it's a pretty big deal. It's a big problem. But we have the community here that can support those children so that they do not stay in the system too long, any longer than they have to. So anytime there's a child that has a CPS case or family, and there's an advocate that is assigned to that case, they spend less time. I think the average is about 5 or 6 months less time in the system than one that does not have an advocate. And what that advocate is going to do is basically begin to see what's going on with the child, what's going on in their life with the child, how are those things, things that perhaps services that they need to receive, whether they are happening or not. And the advocate is going to lift up their voice, they're going to speak up for that child and make sure that those services are provided. The part that says court appointed, that means that the court invites the advocate or invites our organization into the case so that the advocate, who is a volunteer, will have information regarding the child, regarding the needs of the child, regarding where they live and the people that surround them, so that they can be of help if there's anything that needs to be provided for the child or the children. And so many times we have situations where things are lacking. I'll give you a story real quick. I used to work for CPS. And so I was on that side of the equation. And I remember one of my first cases, I got assigned a 4 children case. 4 children were removed. 3 of them were under the age of 4. And out of the 4, 3 of them, their age was 4, 3, and 2. When they were removed, they were placed out of area in a group home. And these children only spoke Spanish. The group home didn't speak Spanish. They did not know Spanish. So when I got assigned that case and I found out that these little kids were away with strangers that didn't speak their language, I was alarmed. So I took off. And I told my supervisor, I'm going to go see these kids. And when I go there and you, of course, talked to the caregivers, and I told them who I was, and I saw the children. When the children heard me speak to them in Spanish, they ran to me. And an advocate, if we would have had an advocate on that case that was bilingual, that could speak to those children, the difference would have been immense. But of course, like I said, I was with CPS, I was not a CASA at the time. And I understood when I became to work with CASA that having an advocate for children in those kinds of situations would make a world of difference. And this is the reason I'm here, because I know that probably maybe not you, but you know someone that could be an advocate for children that are in foster care. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the details of how you can do that. So when we think about what's going on with the life of those children, we have to think about their community, we have to think about their background. We have cases of children that are from other countries. So there's needs there too. Another fact about CASA is that our advocates, a great majority of them are women. And when you look at the cases in Tarrant County or anywhere you go in Texas, it's about 50-50. You have 50% girls, 50% boys. But we don't have enough males that are good examples to these children, that you could be someone significant in their life and make a difference in their life as a male, as a person that could, you know, bring some good in their life. So the needs of, you know, the advocates that we have, it's very significant. So I just want you to think about that. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is how to be involved. So who can be a CASA? You only need to be 21 years old. You don't need a degree. You don't need to be any kind of specialty training. We will provide the training for you. We'll help you understand what the system looks like, what goes on with it. And as a matter of fact, you're not going to be doing that work alone. Once the training is done, you're assigned what is called a child advocacy specialist. And that person is going to walk through with the advocate and go through the whole need of the case and look at what's going on. And that person is going to help you advocate for the children. That person, 21 years old, no degree, we provide the training. You could be you know, a full-time, employed full-time and still have the time. We have many advocates that are full-time, working full-time, and they still have the ability to advocate for children. One little factoid that I was looking up before coming here is that sometimes one of the things that we get from people, oh, but you know, I work full-time, I don't know when I'm going to do that. And the thing about that is that many times we really do what we want to do. We make time for the things that we desire to do. Because that same person will sit down and do a binge watch of whatever in Netflix or whatnot. True? I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we make time for the things that are important to us. And I'm saying that so that we evaluate ourselves and we have to think about what is important. If children are important, then we'll make time for that. So I'm here to let you know that CASA of Tarrant County has been here for 35 years, right, Boss? 35 years. So we've been in Tarrant County for 35 years. And so providing a voice for children that are in the foster care system. Many times we'll have teenagers. Think about the teenagers. Sometimes teenagers will, what is called age out of care, meaning that they turn 18 while they are in the CPS custody. So it's very sad stories sometimes because they don't get opportunities. Or it seems like they don't get opportunities. So our organization, along with other community partners, are making sure that children, even those who are coming out of care, receive services and they can go to school. And some of them decide that they can go to university, to college. And by law, those children receive funds to go to school. They can receive funds, and actually, if it's in a Texas school, all tuition is paid by the state when the children age out of care. There's more details to that, but that's the gist of it. And I just want you to, I wanted to come here. We wanted, as an organization, to be available to let you know that, the things that the mayor was talking about our children, sometimes it feels like there's not much we can do. I can tell you there's organizations like ours that will give you the opportunity to not just be upset about it, but do something about it. And you and I can do something about it when we make a decision to support or become an advocate or a volunteer in an organization like CASA of Tarrant County. I'm just gonna, if anyone has questions, I can take questions. Yes, sir.
Anybody been at foster care?
I'm sorry?
I wonder if anybody's ever been at foster care or knows somebody who has been.
Right? Anybody has been in foster care here in the group? Anybody? Or know someone? Well, I just heard the name, over here, somewhere. If someone has been in foster care, here, and anyone that's here, I just heard the mayor say that her oldest is adopted, right? And she said that that child came out of the foster care system. And I don't know if that child had an advocate. Well, I think she had a really good advocate. in the mayor. But there are children that don't have an advocate, and the outcome of their life is very difficult. And so, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry to ask a question, but like on August 21st, which is Wednesday, 2 weeks from now, in Austin, 1501 51st Street, we're having an event, and I'd like to invite people against CPS, because this year, in the last 12 months, 122 children have died in the hands of CPS workers. So what accountability do you have at CASA to vet the people that are helping and are good Latino officers for the children and advocates in courts for them? Because this is something dangerous, because it's an opportunity for pedophiles and abusers, because there is a fee involved. So people will take multiple children just to get the funds and don't care about the children. And then the CPS workers fake documents, never check on the child, and the child is deceased 3 or 4 months down the road.
Yeah.
So how do you take care of that issue?
Right, great question. So whoever wants to be an advocate and wants to volunteer with CASA Tarrant County, there's a background check that happens. We do 2 background checks, as a matter of fact. And there's an interview process. The first step for becoming a volunteer is you go to what is called an info session. An info session is about an hour, and we give you a lot more information than I'm giving you right now. After that, there's an application process, and you go into the website and you put your application in. There's a lot of questions that are asked in that. Then after that, there's a personal interview, in-person interview with the individual that wants to be an advocate. So there's several things that we put in place before anyone comes in contact with children. And we understand what you're talking about, what's going on with CPS. Here in Tarrant County, it's a little bit different. We have what is called a contractor. That is not CPS, it's a contract by the state, and they are the ones that are taking care of the children when they are in foster care. So it's a little bit different.
Yes. Reverse video over there.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Domingo. How you doing? And was also involved, I had in the input to help the children that were separated from water by the president of nonsense. Did y'all have anything to help assist them?
No, sir, we don't. And the reason for that is that CASA only gets involved in children that are in the foster care system. Those children are not. That's a whole separate issue. But there are other organizations that do that work. CASA specifically, it's only appointed by the court, and that's why that's the difference. We get appointed by the court. There has to be a CPS case for our organization, our volunteers, to be involved with that. Yes, ma'am.
If you become a volunteer, what criteria do you have to meet? I mean, how are the children selected to be the ones that you oversee or you assist with? Especially because you said that our Latino children are the ones that have the need to have more volunteers, and what percentage also come from immigrant homes? How does that? Is there are there special cases where children that are probably undocumented, come from homes like that? How if you're a volunteer, what criteria does a case meet so you can do that?
Great question. There's no criteria per se, in the sense that if it's a CPS case and we have a volunteer to supply that need, we'll put it. That's one of the reasons why we go out to the community to let people know what work we do. Because right now there are how many is it done? 400? About 400 children, 400 children waiting to get an advocate. So if we had the resources and the personnel, the people to do it, and the amount of advocates that we need, we would supply an advocate for every CPS case that comes in. So, sometimes we have to prioritize because of what's going on and how many people we have. we do our very best to match and advocate with the kind of case. So if we see that that case specifically has children or family, not just the children, but the family that speak only Spanish, then we do our best to find an advocate that speaks Spanish. We don't always have enough, but we have people on staff like myself and 3 or 4 others that are bilingual Spanish speakers, and so we try to use our staff to communicate either with the child or the family. But yes, is that good?
Yeah, and it's a good thing that we're helping the young generation out, because if you don't got young generation, you don't got the future.
Correct.
And it's a good thing. But I see back in the days when my mother's Native American and my dad's Mexican American, I saw in my days when the white sisters would come in and take these little Native American kids, cut their hairs, and train them to be white Americans when they were Native Americans.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a sad story like that, so it's about time till we get somebody like you that's willing to help all the children in the community so they can be better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. And that's a very good point because, of course, I'm kind of emphasizing the Latino Hispanic community, but, the Native American community, we have cases that children are originally from Africa or other countries. And we have to, we like to provide an advocate for all of those cases. It's really important to have that because part of the child is their culture. And if we can protect their culture and emphasize their culture, it's a great thing to do. Yes, sir. I know. I'm running out of time. We are right there, our CEO's here. I'm here. If you have any questions, you can come back. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's really important. The Child Protective Services has major issues with that, as what Sheila talked about in terms of children that are taken out of really bad situations. Sometimes the families are drug addicts, I'm talking about mom and dad, or they've been abused, neglected, but then they're put into a situation that's supposed to help them that doesn't really help. So if y'all can volunteer with CASA, volunteer with those programs, or become foster parents, I think those are very important. Those are the empty nesters. I see a lot of empty nesters. Maybe, if they don't get any fluffy, get little Maria Jose de Lisa. Okay? Just an idea. All right, next we have our candidate for Justice of the Peace here in Tarrant County, Jacka Williams.
Buenos dias, good morning. How are you? Good. Well, my name is Jika. I do accept Jeka. My amigo friends call me Hey Guy. I like that too. But my name is pronounced Jika. Jika Williams. So I'm your candidate, your Democratic nominee for Justice of the Peace. So, quick question. How many of you know what Justice of the Peace is? We got a few? Okay. That's good. That's good. So, a Justice of the Peace is a judge. A judge, okay? They are a judge at the civil court level. So those of you who know what the JP is, how many Justice of the Peace courts do we have in Tarrant County? 8. We got 8. 9 is close. So we have 8. I'm running for Justice of the Peace 2, which covers North Arlington, South HEB, the Lake, Pantego, Dalworthington Garden, right? That's not a big deal to you. That doesn't matter. What matters is what happens at the Justice of the Peace Court, right? That's what's important. So the number one thing that happens at the Justice of the Peace Court is eviction. So how many of you are a landlord? You're a landlord, you own property? Got a couple, I noticed a few nods. And then some of us, we rent homes, right? We rent, and we live in someone else's home. I've been a tenant, I've lived in someone's home, but I've also been a landlord and owned a home that I leased out. So I know what it's like to be on both sides, needing to collect rent, but also needing to pay rent, right? It's important that we have a Justice of the Peace Court that's able to look at both sides, because they're making a decision about if someone needs to move out of the home. That's a big deal.
Just so the Peace Corps is affecting people's lives every day. The current Justice of the Peace had an experience where they evicted 100 people in less than an hour.
Wow.
Never saw their face. They don't know if there were children in the home, or abuela, abuelita in the home. They don't know. They just signed a paper and they need to move out. It's important that we have someone in office that wants to ask those kinds of questions, and that we create an environment to invite them in so they feel comfortable to come to court and tell their side. That's important. We have to provide a service where they know that we're there to help. Because I know the tenant needs to get paid. We got bills too, right? But then people also need somewhere to live. So I commit to doing that. The number 2 issue, I love that Mayor Parker talked about the children because we do truancy. Who knows what truancy